You know that feeling when a payment lands and for one brief hour, you feel almost safe. Then you look again and wonder why the number is smaller than the one you had in your head. You start doing the maths on the back of an envelope, and the maths does not seem to like you. That sinking feeling in your stomach is often the moment people realize pension tax is not as gentle as they hoped. And if you like this sort of calm, plain English help sitting quietly in your corner, do subscribe now, because these are not little details and they can cost ordinary people thousands without any warning at all. Today, I want to show you the one big mistake behind that nasty 40% shock and the 6 moments where it usually happens. The theme all the way through is simple. With pension tax, timing matters just as much as amount. The first moment is when someone says, almost proudly, "I'll just take the lot and be done with it." That sounds tidy, sensible, and clean, especially if you are tired of paperwork and you simply want your money in your bank. But for most personal and workplace pension pots, taking the whole thing in one go is exactly how people drag themselves into a bigger tax bill. The pension has taken years to build, yet one rushed withdrawal can make HMRC treat a large slice of it as this year's income. Now here is the rule in plain English. For most people, you can usually take up to 25% of your pension tax-free, up to the normal lump sum allowance, which is £268,275 for most people. The rest is not tax-free at all, and that remaining part is taxed like income when it lands. So if you grab the whole pot at once, 75% of it may pile on top of your other income in one tax year. Write this phrase down because it will save you grief. Split, don't scoop. If your provider allows it, taking money in stages can stop you from pushing too much taxable income into one year for no good reason. In England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, the higher rate starts once taxable income goes above £50,270, and Scotland has its own bands that can bite earlier. So the problem is often not that your pension is too big, but that you tried to pour too much through one tax year doorway. That is why the whole pot approach is so often the expensive approach. If this channel helps you spot these traps before they spot you, you might want to stay with us and subscribe. A pension is not meant to be emptied in one emotional afternoon just because the paperwork says you can. The first protection in retirement is not speed but pace. The second moment comes when people forget that pension income does not live in a separate world. They think of the pension pot as savings, and savings in the mind feel different from wages or pension payments, but the tax system does not see it that way. Once the taxable part comes out, it joins the queue with everything else you receive that year. That includes wages, part-time earnings, rental income, and even your state pension for tax purposes. This catches people because the state pension feels harmless. It is paid without tax taken off, so many assume it sits outside the tax net, but it still counts as taxable income. Very often, HMRC collects the tax due on your state pension by adjusting the tax taken from another pension or from earnings. So if you already have state pension coming in and then add a chunky private pension withdrawal on top, the tax bill can grow faster than expected. Let me give you Margaret, who is 68, widowed, careful with money, and not remotely reckless. She has her state pension, a small teacher's pension from years ago, and one private pension pot she has left alone because she hates fiddling with it. Her boiler fails in January, her granddaughter needs help with a deposit, and Margaret thinks one £40,000 pension withdrawal will sort both problems cleanly. What she has not clocked is that only part is tax-free, and the taxable part lands on top of income she is already getting. When Margaret sees the deduction, she does not feel foolish, she feels ambushed. And that is why I make this point so often, and why, if this kind of steady explanation suits you, you may want to subscribe for future videos. The pension is your money, yes, but once it becomes taxable income, it plays by the year's tax rules, not by your good intentions. That is the second truth to remember. What comes out gets counted. The third moment is all about the calendar, and this one is so ordinary that people miss it completely. They take money in late March because that is when they happen to be thinking about it, not realizing they are only days away from a new tax year. A pension withdrawal on the 1st of April and the same withdrawal on the 6th of April can land very differently after tax. Sometimes the smartest pension move is simply waiting a handful of days. Money Helper gives a good example of this sort of trap. If someone already has £25,000 of earnings and takes a £40,000 pension lump sum before the tax year ends, The taxable part can push them into a higher band. Take part before the tax year ends and part just after the new one starts, and the overall tax can be lower. That is not a loophole or a trick, it is just using the tax year sensibly. So here is the phrase for this point: use the tax year door. Before you take a large withdrawal, ask yourself whether crossing from one tax year into the next would spread the taxable income more gently. That one pause can matter far more than hours spent comparing savings accounts, because the real leak may be the timing of the withdrawal itself. Retirement tax is often a calendar problem wearing a money costume. If you have ever rushed a money decision simply because you were fed up and wanted it done, you are not alone. And if you would like a regular nudge to slow down before costly decisions, feel free to subscribe and keep these conversations close by. The third lesson is not dramatic, but it is powerful. A few days of patience can sometimes save a few £1,000s. That is the sort of patience retirement rewards. The fourth moment is when the first withdrawal arrives and the tax looks completely absurd. People ring the provider and say, "That cannot be right." And often the answer is maddening, because the answer is, it may not be the final amount. On first withdrawals, pension providers often use a temporary or emergency tax code. That can mean the system acts as if your one-off payment is something you will receive every month. So a £10,000 taxable payment can be treated as though your yearly income has suddenly leapt far higher than it really has. That is why some people see higher rate tax taken even when, over the full year, they should not have paid that much. Now, this is important. Emergency tax is a real cash flow hit, but it is not always the final verdict. Sometimes HMRC refunds it automatically later, and sometimes you need to claim it back. The practical phrase here is this: emergency is not final. If you have flexibly accessed part of your pension and not emptied it, the reclaim route may be through a form called P55. If you emptied the pot and stopped work, there is a different route, often P50Z, and for some small pot cases there is P53. You do not need to memorize the form names tonight, but you do need to remember that a first ugly tax deduction may be reclaimable. I have spoken to people who spent months feeling angry about tax they did not actually owe in the end. So, if this kind of plain, no drama guidance gives you a bit of confidence, subscribe and keep it nearby for later. The fourth lesson is simple: do not mistake a temporary tax code for the final truth about your pension. Always check, because silence is expensive. The fifth moment comes later, when someone is still working or still paying into a pension and thinks nothing has really changed. They have taken a bit of taxable cash from a flexible pension arrangement and assume their future pension contributions can carry on under the old limits. But once you take taxable flexible income from a defined contribution pension, a different rule can kick in. That rule is the money purchase annual allowance, which cuts the usual contribution room sharply. For most people, the normal annual allowance is much larger, but after the trigger, the money purchase annual allowance is £10,000. In plain English, that means future contributions into defined contribution pensions can hit a tax limit much sooner than you expected. This matters to people doing part-time work, people still employed past 60, and people whose employer is still paying into a pension. It also matters to anyone thinking of taking a bit now and rebuilding the pot later. Here is your phrase for this one: 10 means 10. Not everyone triggers this rule in the same way, and taking only tax-free cash is different from taking taxable flexible income, so details matter. But once taxable flexible access has happened, assuming you can simply carry on under the old contribution limits can be a very costly mistake. The tax shock here comes later, which makes it even easier to miss. This point is not as exciting as a big lump sum, but it is exactly the sort of thing that quietly bites sensible people. And if you value having these less glamorous but very important warnings explained without jargon, you are very welcome to subscribe. The fifth lesson is that pension withdrawals can change the rules for future saving, not just today's bank balance. Retirement planning is joined up even when life feels messy. The sixth moment is the one I worry about most, because it often arrives dressed up as urgency. A text says, "Your pension could be released early." A caller says, "There is a better scheme." Or a friend of a friend says, "Move fast before a rule changes." When people feel pressured, they stop planning and start reacting. That is when bad withdrawals, bad transfers, and outright scams come into the room. The normal minimum age for taking private pension money is usually 55 at the moment. rising to 57 from April 2028 for most people. So anyone waving an easy early access promise in front of you should set off alarm bells straight away. You could lose your money, face an ugly tax bill, or be pushed into a transfer that makes no sense for your life. Pressure is not proof that something is urgent, it is often proof that something is wrong. Let me give you Alan, 61, still doing 3 days a week driving a school minibus, proud that he has never been taken in by nonsense. He gets a call saying his pension is underperforming and can be moved fast into something more flexible, with cash available sooner and better returns later. It sounds efficient, modern, and oddly flattering because the caller makes Alan feel like a man who is getting ahead of the system. What saves him is one small habit. He says he never signs anything before sleeping on it and checking it independently. The phrase for this last point is one I want you to keep. No rush, no transfer, no withdrawal. And if you are near pension age with a defined contribution pot, use PensionWise, the free guidance service, before doing anything big. A calm appointment can help you understand your options, the tax and the scam risks before real money starts moving. The sixth lesson is that haste is where tax mistakes and crooks shake hands. When you stand back from all 6 moments, the pattern becomes very clear. The danger is not just taking pension money, because of course many people need to do that, and there is nothing wrong with using your pension. The danger is taking pension money in the wrong shape, in the wrong order, or in the wrong tax year. That is why our central theme matters so much. Timing matters just as much as amount. If someone in your life keeps putting this off because it all feels too fiddly, send this video to them as a kindness. It might be a brother who is about to retire, a neighbor living off small pensions, a parent trying to help grown-up children, or a friend recently widowed. Not because they need frightening, and not because they need selling to, but because they deserve a calmer start than many people get. Sometimes sharing one clear explanation is a very decent thing to do. I want to leave you with a simple picture. Your pension is not a bucket of water to throw over the day you feel hot, frustrated, or in a hurry. It is more like the water tank that quietly feeds the whole house, one room after another, at the pace the house can handle. Tip it all out in one wild rush, and you make a mess outside while leaving yourself short indoors. So before you touch it, slow the moment down. Ask what part is tax-free, what part becomes income, what year it lands in, and whether you really need all of it now. That small pause is not weakness, and it is not dithering, it is protection. Very often, the people who keep more of their pension are simply the people who refuse to rush. Your pension has taken years of work, years of ordinary sacrifice, and years of quiet patience to build. It deserves to be handled with the same patience on the way out. Take it carefully, take it knowingly, and let it serve your life rather than your panic.